I'm Jaron Mitchell. No, so just by the way of a show of hands, who has heard of Four Pines before now? God, that's the best response I've ever seen, including in Manly. Who's been to the venue in Manly? Yeah, it's pretty solid. Okay, so how we kicked off? We basically kicked off as a microbrewery bar restaurant about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago in Manly and Sydney. My background was hospitality, so that's the sort of part of the side that I really get. I love good beer. Had a bit of a crack with homebrew, way back in the day, and the level of success I'm not sure, but there's some very good people that are around me with tons of commercial craft brewing experience that sort of brought into the business in the early days of conception. And we originally rolled out our beers through sort of a great, I guess you'd call it gastro pub / beer. And where was I going with that? So just as going back a couple of steps, Melbourne Cup Day Tuesday, we had our annual staff Christmas party Wednesday, drinking till 5 a.m, quarter plane up here on Thursday, had a beer dinner Thursday night, ended up at Archive last night, and here I am today. So my level of cloudiness could be sort of more than normal, so if I get lost, apologies. But so we basically started in that sort of context, and for the first, we developed 4 beers originally on tap. And the thing with, I guess, that brewery is you've got to, when you're taking beer out into the marketplace, and particularly when most people that charged up the stairs for the very first time didn't even know what craft beer was. In fact, they'd never had anything other than a Tooheys New or a Corona. You had to be really careful on sort of how much in the early days you sort of began to walk them outside of their comfort zone. So our original first 4 beers were a Kolsch, which is our biggest seller still over the bar and actually out in the trade, an American style pale ale, an extra special bitter, and a Hefeweizen. So that's what we kicked off, and that was our core 4 for the first little while. Now, when eventually, I guess our local customers got comfortable with that, and we really began to introduce people to the whole craft beer thing in Manly and Sydney. And by this stage, people from sort of wider Sydney might have heard of the venue and took the dreaded ferry trip across or whatever it might be. It was time, okay, well, let's start rolling with maybe something a little bit seasonal. And we had two sort of names at the time. We had a seasonal and a specialty, and we didn't quite even know what they really meant. The only thing we knew about the seasonal is that there was 4 seasons, and that was kind of possibly the inspiration for how we develop beers and seasonally matched. Nothing that hasn't been done before. So very, very sort of grassroots basic steps. And the first thing we did was just a French-Belgian saison. I'm sure pretty much everyone in the room's probably had a crack at that at some stage, with a bit of coriander and ginger and whatever else it may be. So and then we rolled into autumn time, and for autumn we did an English style IPA, and that was sort of ticking along pretty well. And we said, well, that's a formula that works. And then we're just sitting around one day, and we thought, well, hang on, that's St Pat's Day. Everyone gets a little bit Irish on St Pat's Day. Let's just start using this specialty badge. So we brewed our first dry Irish stout. And for those of you that do or don't know about anyone know about the space beer story yet? A few hands. I'm going to get to that, and this is where sort of the evolution of beer and styles kicks off at a very, very granular grassroots level and can just go. So we basically we brought out, this is going back 3 years ago for our first St Pat's Day, a dry Irish stout, and everyone dressed in green, and we got some short people to, got the Irish tunes going. The kitchen just pumped out a fantastic Irish stew, and it's almost like a light bulb went off in our head, and we went, actually, this is how we will run our beers going forward. We'll get every single beer event of a major or sort of day like a St Pat's Day, and just for the entire world, and that's how we'll kind of build our specialty beer list, sort of as we kind of went. And the thing I love about anyone that's had our stout in the bottle, you can get it up here at Dan's now, but at the pub in Manly, we actually serve it on nitrogen. So it's that little kind of, it's worth the plane trip down anyway. But anyway, so this light bulb thing. So we got out this calendar of one of those big sort of year planners, just got on the internet and just started putting countries of the world in and just writing up where they were. So very quickly we saw that St George's Day was just around the corner on the St Pat's is the 17th of March, St George's the 23rd of April. So we're like, right, let's get brewing, you know. So we brewed up this a porter for St George's Day, and in fact a lot of our original local customers at Four Pines were English people, English and American expats living in Manly, often commuting to the city for the day, who got craft beer, loved the fact we're serving it in pints, you know, etc., etc. So we had an English-themed, you know, so we dressed as, you know, the staff dressed up as, you know, Sex Pistols. I think there was an Amy Winehouse in there. We got like our fattest male to dress up as the Queen. You know, just mucked around, got a whole bunch of English tunes, and I think we did like a Yorkshire pudding, and you know, brought out this cracker of a porter. And then we had all these, and then we were sort of rolling into winter, remembering back to the whole seasonal thing. And we went, oh shit, that's right, we've got this seasonal thing. We got so sort of caught up with the specialty beers. So we had this monster breakfast where it was a stout versus porter breakfast. And you know, basically the beer club that we began to evolve, which is our little sort of online you know, mailing list, we invited all of them to have a breakfast on us and determine the fate of what was going to be the winter seasonal. And as it turned out, sort of the stout won. And you know, the story of the stout sort of keeps on going. But it was about that point that we actually flicked the whole seasonal thing, and then we just kind of cranked home the specialty beers. And then the next one for the hopheads was obviously American Independence Day. And since that time, the original one we did was a double IPA. I think it was an 8.8%, 87 IBU. It was a monster. And that was the first time we really kind of stepped out of the comfort zone for most people coming into the venue, where I think that probably only about 40% of people that actually tried some gave it a crack. But I do know one dude, he actually lives up here, he lives on the Sunshine Coast, and he was a regular at Four Pines because he was an IT consultant in a firm somewhere in Sydney, and he used to stay at this little bed and breakfast just 100 metres away. We have a responsible service of alcohol policy. That's like I'm not disclaimer, right? This guy had 10. We do a regular glass, 365ml double IPAs. I think there was a shift change, a staff change somewhere in amongst. He got found by one of our staff members 50 metres away from the brewery and 50 metres away from his accommodation, just sort of asleep in the park. So that I think that was obviously the first time that we had a big alcohol beer. It almost took everyone by surprise, but it was an absolute belter, and we actually haven't brought that beer out again, but we're going to do it again for this American Independence coming up. But also, you know, the other American Independence we've done since then have been an American Dark Ale. We did a rye PA for the first time, so essentially just our normal, well, it isn't an APA, just sort of maybe touching on the fringes of the very, very early stages of an IPA. It just sort of breaches that gap a bit. We just basically threw 25% rye on top of that, and that was, you know, something different and something interesting. Actually, there's one keg of that. The boys at the archive had a keg of that about 2 months ago. So, you know, little by little, I think, you know, we'll certainly be getting these kind of further and wider as we, you know, have been beginning to. So, you know, St Pat's Day, St George's Day, American Independence Day. What have we got here? Oh yeah, St Andrew's Day. You know, Wee Heavy Scotch Ale, Oktoberfest, which we've run 3 years in a row now, where obviously we all get dressed up in lederhosen. The kitchen makes pretzels. We sell steins, and we have a Dunkel, a Märzen, a Pilsner, and a Crystal Weizen, and that goes sort of non-stop now every year. And in fact, at the pub now, we've still got some Pilsner left and some maybe Dunkel left. So that was kind of you know, the list of days. But then, you know, the other core events where we kind of made brewers for, and then. So I guess sort of the inspiration for also making beer is you sometimes just have that necessity becomes the mother of all invention. And two beers in particular well, one in particular, the Canadian Ale. So Canada Day is actually the 1st of July. and American Independence Day is the 4th of July. So I actually didn't know this until we started doing this thing. And when we very first did our American Independence Day, it was advertised and all these Canadians started charging up the stairs saying, what about us? And so we went, oh shit, yeah, what about you guys? So Nick, who is one of the founding partners, who is on the brewing side, I actually grew up with him. I'm from 3 hours south of Perth in sort of the Margaret River region. That's where my heritage is. And so he actually was winemaking before he finished school, and he's actually got a longer winemaking career than he does brewing, and he still does a wine vintage every year until this day. He loves blending. So we actually, during harvest, I don't want to start crapping on about wine, but it's the wrong place. But I don't know if you guys have ever, and ladies have ever been around it, but you see winemakers and they just like chew fruit, and they just get berries and they just put them together, and that's how they start, making blends for wines. And I found this really interesting because blending isn't really anything you ever hear of, in the brewing industry, unless it's sort of the big breweries just, putting 6 tanks together to, filter and then sort of, make it as generic as possible. But we actually began blending off our taps, and by this time we had a bit of double IPA we could throw into the mix. We had some ESB. We had, and we actually created about 4 kegs of what we called our Canadian ale. And it actually bloody worked. It went off, and we've got this one blog website, and it's called Back of the Ferry. It's a couple of guys that just love their beer, and they just started catching the ferry from Sydney. Well, that's how they get to work and back each day. And they just talk about beer and just having beers on the back of the ferry, and Four Pines features a lot. And they know a bit about beer, I've got to say. So that's our litmus test for whether we've been successful or not with these specialty releases and so on and so forth. And I think that's the beer they've loved the most out of all of them. So somehow that actually works. So and then we sort of really honed in on the events, but then obviously these events don't go forever. So it's also exploring kind of other facets of beer. Probably about 1.5 years ago, and I know that some other breweries also do this, but we just did a single hopped full Nelson, so with the Nelson Sauvin hop. And what the rationale for the brewer was at that time. So I think everyone can get really excited sometimes and you can when you're obviously home brewing for yourself and you're making 20 litres and all your mates just love it and love the bigger and better beers. But sometimes the simplicity and the complexity, the simplicity can actually show the craft of a brewer and a beverage as much as that complex thing can. And I think that's what Andrew, who was brewing the full Nelson, wanted to show, that he could just, with one single hop, I think it was just purely ale malt, and actually put these things side by side with your double IPAs and your IPAs and so on and so forth. So, and that went down an absolute treat. And he actually took a keg of that to the Brewers Fest that they have, this little Brewers Fest that they have in Sydney. And that was the keg out of all the kegs. It was pretty much Sydney breweries plus, some of the big sort of national ones kind of had representation there. And the full Nelson keg actually went first. So we went, oh shit, this is, and I think the whole story and, a lot of home brewers were there and that kind of thing. So the whole story kind of then brought us to come upon this single hop series that we then rolled out. So we did it last summer, beginning of last summer, and we're actually doing it again now and sort of re-releasing it. And so what we do is we use pale wheat and crystal, all the same across the board. We try and shoot for 26 IBUs, and the hops through every stage are the exact same, but we have 4 different streams, and we're doing an Amarillo, Sriracha Ace, an Aramis, and a Galaxy. So that's a great way, I guess, to expose, to be quite simplistic, but at the same time demonstrate and showcase to everyone in this room knows exactly what I'm talking about, but for guys out in the street, they don't even know what beer is yet, really, let alone hops. So it's kind of taken them to that sort of next level. So that's been a fantastic, fun sort of a little project. And then the one event that I actually have neglected to say until this point. So we had the St Pat's Day celebrations, and the stout eventually became a permanent tap and served on nitrogen in the pub, and in fact it became a permanent, one of our 4 permanent core bottle lines. And about 18 months ago, a local customer of ours, I only knew him as Jason, and I knew him as the guy that used to be banging on the door. We opened at about 11 a.m, and he'd be standing at the door at 11 a.m. most days, and he'd have a schnitzel and about 5 pints of beer. And I actually got a little bit worried about him for a while, but actually, and that's how I knew Jason. And he, American guy as well, and he rocks up one day and goes, how would you like to put your beer in space? And I got really worried about him at that point. But actually turns out that Dr. Jason Held is one of the leading space engineers in the country. His CV is just phenomenal, like fighter plane, like all this sort of stuff that, you watch James Bond movies, and he's kind of ticked a lot of those boxes. So now, so being a space engineer, loved what we were doing with our beers, and wanted to sort of work with a small brewery that could, be really flexible and turn on a dime and create a beer to be ready for space. So why? That's the first question that everyone asks. Well, space until this point has actually been a realm for, elite, highly trained professionals, aka astronauts, and, right now there might be 6 or 8 guys on the International Space Station. But, going forward over the next, as of next year, space tourism is going to kick off. So it's going to change from being purely a realm of the public sector where people actually are prohibited to drink, into this realm of, at first a very small amount. You've got guys like Virgin Galactic and X-Core and so on and so forth. As we know through time, man, when man goes to somewhere new, or the IPA story, which everyone in the room no doubt knows is a classic example. We think of water, food, shelter, clothing, and pretty much if the beer's not on straight after, people get pretty disgruntled pretty quickly. So, from a logical progression through thousands of years of human history, this is a story that makes total sense. So we actually began developing the space beer, but obviously, any sort of event-driven thing, I hope everyone's getting the idea now, and 4 pints requires a little bit of a party. So we actually were the first manned spacecraft into space with Yuri Gagarin, was called Vostok. And in fact, every year, the space community worldwide has what they call Yuri's Night. So it's about 500 parties worldwide, all happening on the 12th of April every year. And this year was the 50th anniversary. So we cooked up a Russian Imperial Stout. The joint venture of the project between 4 Pines and Jason's company, Sabre Astronautics, is now called Vostok. We got the guys from the Russian embassy to rock on down. We all got in hats, and it was a Tuesday night as well, and we actually went mad. And we drove all around Sydney to find the best bottle of vodka I possibly could. And even then, when I said, "Oh, look, come on, guys, be honest. Like, how close to the mark are we with the vodka?" And they went, 5. So but we had a lot of vodka. We smashed this a lot of this sort of 7.8% Russian Imperial Stout, and had a belter of a night. So that's another obviously event-driven inspiration to kind of start building new styles and bringing beers out sort of commercially. But then, as for the space beer, or the why did we choose stout? What's the sort of the rationale around it? Well, basically, a couple of things happen to you in space that mean we can't just take normal beer up there. First thing is your tongue swells. So astronauts for years have been known to throw handfuls of salt and bottles of Tabasco sauce to actually try and generate and drive flavour on their palate. So we need to start with a big full-bodied beer. And so, what I guess we're hoping is once we nail this stout, is, there's a whole raft of other beers that we'll be able to apply, to this. So that's sort of, obviously future research development. We're just kind of honing and playing with the stout at the moment. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is when you're on Earth and you burp, the gas and gravity has something to do with the gas in the liquid, which means that just the gas comes up. In space, because you're suspended, the gas and the liquid don't have that sort of same separation thing. So both the gas and the liquid can come up when you burp. So that's called a wet burp. That's the technical that's the technical name for. So just as a side point, this is actually the first formal study ever in the world of alcohol in zero gravity. So for us to organise what we have so far, the amount of approvals and everything and this is all Jason, they do everything space, we do everything beer. The sort of stuff that he's gone through to sort of get this across the line is just quite phenomenal. We're talking like, the Federal Aviation Authority, the FAA in the US, actually having to write new sections, in their code of ethics and to actually accommodate for this sort of stuff. So, et cetera, et cetera. But so where are we up to with the space beer so far? I'm sure everyone here would have heard how we did a little bit of work with the Queensland University with their drop tower. So that was the first step. So we used the non-alcoholic beverage and the food study that we'd had, for years and years and years, applied it to beer, and then we used the drop tower at Queensland Uni, which gives you a couple of seconds of suspended space, where you can actually see the micro properties of the beverage, etc. That all went pretty well. And then in February this year, we sent a little mini keg over to Florida. We got ourselves an astronaut, and we put him on a zero gravity flight, or what they call those vomit comets, aptly named, where there's modified Boeing 747s, where these things just point their nose up to the sky, and then free fall, and you get about 30 seconds of zero gravity, and they do that about 22 times. Fun. No one here's from NASA, are they? No? Federal Aviation Authority? No? Good. The best bit that we actually had to take out, so we didn't have written approval to do it, was him actually catching... Well, sorry, he did it. We had it on camera, but we had to delete all footage of him actually catching beer balls in the air. Pretty much one of the cool... the Homer Simpson chips? Quite literally the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So... what are we going to from here? We're actually, as far as this project is concerned, we're currently developing the first space beer bottle. So a whole bunch of sort of technicals around that, because I don't know if you could or couldn't tell from that, but he actually had to use a squeezy water bottle that he could kind of just collapse and drink. There's some great footage of the first study of actual beverage trial. This is going back 40 years ago, non-alcoholic beverage, orange juice or something. And when you pour anything, how you get the meniscus, because obviously the surface tension is greater than the outside gravity. Well, obviously because there's no gravity on the outside, the surface tension is always more. So there's this footage of this astronaut in sort of the early 70s, and they had it in sort of a glass, and he actually couldn't get it out. So you've got him for an hour just because he's being paid, obviously it's an expensive experiment. He's just doing this for an entire hour. So the whole logistics of the bottle have to change and be space apt. And also the other thing is we have to find an appropriate material because glass, if it shatters, will just float around everywhere. So we've got to find some sort of polycarb or something like that that feels and looks like a bottle that people are used to on Earth. And then also the other cool thing they're actually doing, we've teamed up with a guy who runs booze tour companies around, booze tourism, I guess you'd call it. So, a couple of weeks and he'll take you to the Oktoberfest for a few days and then Belgium and, his beer-centric trips. He's actually currently putting together the first package for people to buy a space flight and drink beers in space. So that's all happening as we speak. So we're looking probably in the next 6 to 12 months to do a 15-man trial, now that we know this stuff doesn't kill you, which we proved with the astronaut there. So, that's sort of a step that's kind of still evolving. So, I guess that's sort of a little bit of a left-of-centre operation for any brewery and particularly us. But, I guess the question you asked why, I mean, it's a whole lot of fun and it's a bit of a first, and why wouldn't you? That's that's what I reckon anyway. So, and then as far as the development and the evolution of specialty beers for us, the more sort of core traditional, as much as they are kind of outside the realms for most people, we're about to sort of upgrade our brewing facility. We're whacking in a 50 hectolitre brewery just sort of around the corner. So that'll be able to sort of, take away sort of some of our, sort of bigger batch kind of stuff, which is really going to open up the smaller brewery for us to create more styles of specialty stuff and begin to sort of get it out in the trade a lot more. So, there's probably only about 30 venues in Australia, and obviously, that'll be sort of popping up more and more and more. So. As far as specialty beers, the development of specialty beers and ingredients used, I mean, I probably didn't go too much into the ingredients because my assumed knowledge of everyone here that it's better than mine in the first place. But that's sort of us in a nutshell, and more than happy to take any questions if anyone would like. Thanks for listening, I guess.